Okay, welcome everybody to Redesigning School Counseling webinar for first-year schools. This webinar will help schools prepare for their first advisory council meeting, and the focus of that meeting is to introduce your advisory council to Redesigning School Counseling. Here's today's agenda. We're going to begin, as we will with every webinar, in very quickly going through the RSC beliefs and the RSC process. Then we'll start talking specifically about preparing for that first meeting with your advisory council. So we're going to walk through the presentation and the discussion that you'll have with the advisory council, and then we'll talk about the submissions that you'll turn in after the advisory council. And then we'll go to the online system to look at the manual for that support, the manual items that support this first meeting, and also the process page that supports your first meeting. So, quick review. Let's start with the RSC beliefs. And just a reminder that we believe that school counseling programs help students make sound choices. And all of RSC, everything that we're doing is for that purpose, that focus, to help kids make choices that impact academic success. This is the school counseling pyramid, and it kind of shows our belief again that when students are involved in sound school counseling programs, sound guidance activities, sound counseling activities, that they tend to make better choices, and as a result of that, student achievement goes up. Then when we're designing the process, we're going to just work that pyramid backwards. We're going to start by looking at what are the academic goals that your school has. Those goals are in your school improvement plan. And then we'll say, okay, in order for your school to reach those academic goals, what choices do students need to make? We'll come up with a list of all of the choices, maybe a long list, 50, 60 different choices that kids need to make while they're in your building in order to be wildly successful at school. And then we'll look at, okay, well, if we want kids to make those choices, then what guidance activities are we going to put in place and what counseling activities are we going to put in place? And then the idea is that if we design this all well and then we start working it bottom up, we'll put the activities in place, kids will make better choices, achievement will go up. So here's the process that we'll use this year to do this. We've already done step one, which is to get ready. You've put together your steering team. I know most of you have 2 to 4 some bigger steering teams, which is great because now you'll be able to delegate some of the work to each other. You collected data, you've completed some self-studies, some baseline studies, and you're in the process of, or you've just completed putting together your advisory council, and you've done a wonderful job of that. I'm very, very tickled with the effort that you put into that. So now we're ready to talk about having that first meeting with all the folks that you're bringing to the table. So that's what we're prepping on today, is how to get ready for that first meeting. Then next month, we'll talk about the second meeting with your advisory council, which is to collectively come up with a dream or a vision for what you want for kids. And then in November, we'll come up with the student choices that you want all kids to make in order to get to that dream. And then in December, we'll start out by expanding all of the resources that we can find. We'll work with your advisory council to get you more time, more energy, more funding, and then we'll say, okay, given who we are and how much energy we have and how much time and how much funding is available, how many of those program goals can we really tackle as priority goals for next school year? And you'll come up with maybe just one of your program goals that you're really going to hit hard next year, maybe 2, maybe 3. But it'll be a small number of program goals that you really hit hard for the purpose of changing the degree to which students make a targeted choice in your building. Then after we've set those priority goals, then we'll start to explain, well, how come kids aren't making that choice now? What's getting in the way? It may be that they don't have knowledge that they need, or maybe they've got a personal social issue that's interfering with their ability to make good decisions. Or maybe they know what they're supposed to do and everything's fine social personally, but we just haven't given them the opportunity to do the things that they have to do. So we call that a root cause analysis. We'll start to explore why kids aren't making the choices that we want them to make. Then once we know the why, then in March we'll start looking about how to fix the why. And we'll come up with targeted activities that will address those root causes. And the idea is that if we put the right activities in, we get rid of the root causes, then kids will start making the choices that we want them to make. And then in April and May, the Advisory Council's work is done, but the counselors now will start doing the preparation for next school year. They'll write lesson plans and develop a program calendar, an individual calendar, and then an annual budget. So that's the process. Let's just stop real quickly and see if we have any questions. If so, just raise your hand or type it in real quick, and we'll go.
I don't see any questions.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so this month's task then is to get ready for that first Advisory Council meeting. I can remember my first Advisory Council meeting, and it was just I was very, very nervous. But once everybody got there and I found out that we were all kind of on the same page and wanting the same stuff for kids, it was just amazingly uplifting. I loved it. So let's get ready for this meeting. First of all, let's look at the agenda for the meeting. And I'm going to actually pull that up offline. Oops. There we go. Here's the agenda. And when we look at agendas, you're going to see that after each task, we've given you an estimate of how much time we think that that's going to take. And then over here, there's these words that say time. So when you get the agenda, let's say you decide you're going to start your meeting at 4 o'clock, you would just write in here 4 o'clock. This activity is supposed to take 20 minutes, so then the next time would be 4:20, and just kind of work it through that way. We don't know what time each of you are going to start your meetings, so we couldn't put those times up to the left. We do suggest that you put times in your agendas because that if people tend to get wordy or sidetracked, this really shows them that they need to stay on task, because then you start running behind on your agenda. Okay, so the agenda is we're going to start out by doing introductions, and part of the warm-up activity is actually doing introductions. We think that will take about 20 minutes. Then we'll do an introduction of RUBRIC counseling. We'll talk about the foundational beliefs, about the different types of guidance and counseling activities, and about how we're going to do accountability in RSC. That's a little bit longer presentation. We're going to get into terminology here as well that we'll be using all year. We're estimating about 40 minutes on that one. And then break. Then we want to specifically introduce C. So we'll be introducing the organizational structure, explaining about the steering team and the Advisory Council and the role of both. We'll talk about the process that the Advisory Council will be going through throughout the year. And then finally, we'll be explaining to everyone that we are putting together, as a result of all these discussions, documents that will go into a portfolio, and that you'll be submitting that portfolio for the Indiana Gold Star Award and possibly the ASCA Ramp Award. Then, at the end of that, then we're going to start listening. The first activity is to facilitate a discussion around group norms so that we kind of have some agreement about how we're going to treat each other, and things that will tend to come up there are things like, just logistics, things like we're going to start on time, there should be an agenda, and things like that, turn your cell phones off. But then also we want things to come up like, let's put kids first, and let's not do things just because it's always been done that way, but let's really take a critical look at things. Let's agree that sometimes we're going to disagree, and we won't take it personally. So we really want to just kind of define here how we're going to work together as a team. And in the presentation, there's some tools for you to use to do that. And then the final discussion is actually going to result in the first document that you'll submit to the portfolio. And that is the benefits of school counseling. So we'll ask the Advisory Council to brainstorm the benefits of school counseling for students and teachers, administrators, parents, and the economic community in your local area. So okay, so that's the agenda. All of our agendas are designed to be 2-hour agendas. However, if that seems like a push for you, we have had groups shorten the agendas. We've had them do parts as reading assignments before they get to the meeting. My personal experience is that when you try to go shorter than 2 hours, it rushes the discussion and it's not nearly as rich as it would be if people could just relax and spend the 2 hours really digging into some discussions. So, but on the other hand, I certainly remember what it was like to be in a school where time is at a premium, and if you need to break this into 2 one-hour meetings or to somehow condense it, you know, that's just something you have to do. It's just, if you do that, just keep in mind that you're probably weakening the process when you do that. So, okay, so that is the agenda. Now, let's look at the PowerPoint. So here's the presentation. Okay, and this is online. In a minute, we're going to look at the manual and show you where to find this. Okay, so the first slide is just a welcome slide. Usually schools will have this up when people come in the room, so they know they're in the right place. And then the next slide is a slide that kind of cues you to do the warm-up activity, which is to have people do introductions, but in a way that allows them to not only introduce themselves, but to explain what perspective they bring to the table. So in the setup for that, you'd be asking people, you know, introduce yourself, but, you know, consider who you are and what perspective could you bring to the table. Do you have the perspective of a third-grade parent, or of the Hispanic community, or of the career and tech ed student, or, you know, what perspective do you bring to the table? So the group will go around, everybody introduces themselves. There's a document called the Advisory Council roster that you'll fill out ahead of time, write everybody's names down and their email addresses and phone numbers. But the last column says perspective, and that column you'll leave blank. And then as people share their perspectives, you can jot that down on the everybody can jot that down on their forms. Some people will come up with perspectives that are totally different than what you intended. You may have invited somebody to be on the council because they were a Hispanic person and you wanted to have the Hispanic viewpoint represented. And but when they're going around, they may say, I can represent the perspective of a third-grade parent. That's fine. That really doesn't matter. The beauty of this task is that we want people to understand that if they're absent at the next meeting, there's a perspective that's missing. If they're gone, nobody's going to be representing the third-grade parents. There's a couple of things that we do in meetings to make sure that people keep coming back, and this is one of them, to help people understand that we're listening and that their perspective, their participation is important because they're the only one that brings that perspective to the table. So, okay, so that's the introductions, and then we'll go over the agenda with folks in the Advisory Council. We just want them to know that we're going to be talking about, you know, what is school counseling, and then what we're going to be doing this year, and then there's some tasks at the end where we're going to be brainstorming school counseling benefits. Then we'll start into foundational beliefs, and just the purpose of school counseling is to enable all students to prepare for academic success at the next level, responsible citizenry, and employment in a global economy. There's the impact statement, so we'll go over that with them. Here's the pyramid, so we'll cover that. And then on this slide, what we want to bring out with this slide is that school counseling is for all students. Your advisory council members, their perception right now of school counseling is what they saw when they were a student. And there's a good likelihood that they never saw their school counselor. You know, the developmental school counseling and the idea that there are guidance lessons that we reach all kids, that's relatively new. It used to be that the only people that ever saw their counselors were students who were in trouble, or students who were whose parents had been to college, whose parents said, go down and see your counselor, find out about the PSAT. or students who were involved in special ed who saw their counselors as part of an annual case review. But the majority of students never saw their counselors. So you're probably working with advisory council people who have no clue what a school counselor does, and their experience with school counseling probably was non-existent. So we really want to emphasize all through this opening session is that school counseling is for every student, and that we're setting up a system so that every student can be involved in guidance lessons and that can learn what they need to learn to make good decisions. Okay, and then the next thing we're doing is we're introducing the guidance activities and also guidance terminology. So we're explaining that school counselors do 4 types of activities: guidance, counseling, advocacy, and management. And then we're going to go into each one of the types of activities in more in depth and cover terminology in those. And this is terminology that we'll be using all year. So the first of the 4 activity types is guidance. And we're defining guidance as activities that help all students learn and apply knowledge needed to make sound educational, career, and social personal decisions. Key word there is all, and I pointed out to your advisory council that all kids need guidance. All kids need help with making decisions about their future. And so guidance activities are designed to reach all students. The other thing I always like to bring out on this slide is that guidance activities are educational in nature, so they can be taught by a whole group of different people, not just school counselors, but classroom teachers, community members, Boy Scout leaders, youth service organization workers, lots of parents, lots of different people can teach kids what they need to know in order to make good decisions. So those are guidance activities. And then we also want to explain that guidance now, the guidance part of our job, it is a curriculum, just like math, just like English, that we have classes or subject areas, and we have standards. And I like to use the terms subject areas and standards. I think that that makes sense with people who are non-educators, or subject areas and knowledge within those subject areas. So our subjects are academic development, career development, and personal social development. And then within each of those subjects, we have things that we want all students to learn and be able to demonstrate that they've learned it. For example, all 5th graders would demonstrate learning skills. In career development, all 8th graders will write a career plan. In personal social, all 12th graders will describe conflict management techniques. So these are actually things we're going to teach to students, and this is a curriculum just like math, just like English, subject areas and the knowledge that we want kids to master within those subject areas. And just like math and science, we have lesson plans. This is just a sample lesson plan for learning styles. The guidance goal is that all students will describe ways in which they can adjust their classroom learning strategies to complement their learning styles. Materials, time required procedures, this looks just like a math lesson or an English lesson, it's just this is a guidance lesson. And then the other part with guidance is that we can deliver guidance 2 different ways. Guidance can be one-on-one. So it may be that the counselors are calling each student individually to their office to talk about their course selections. And as a part of those meetings with students, they're teaching students about the courses and what's required for different post-secondary options, etc. So guidance can happen one-on-one, and guidance can also happen in the classroom. And again, if your folks have not been in school for a while, this is a totally new concept that school counselors actually go into classrooms and teach. So in a high school, you could talk about how you go in and you talk about course selections and preparing for helping students understand how to prepare for post-secondary. In elementary school, you can talk about all the classroom guidance lessons that you do and how you get into the classrooms. And then the other part about guidance is, since guidance is educational based, again, it can be delivered by lots of different folks. So it may be that the school counselors are teaching some guidance lessons. It may be that community members are either teaching guidance lessons as part of their Boy Scout troop or their boys club or girls club. But it also may be that community members are coming into the school and coordinating with to themselves deliver guidance lessons in the school. So maybe your economic development folks want to come in and do some type of lesson on career development, or why academics are so important. But it could also be in a teacher advisor program or a community mentor program. And then also guidance lessons can happen as real-world applications for academic lessons. For example, if there's an academic lesson on how to take a mathematical average, you could apply that to calculating a GPA and tie it into a guidance lesson. So lots of different ways that guidance lessons can be provided, and you can give examples from your own school about how those lessons are provided in community. Then the second of the 4 types, and I always emphasize second of 4, third of 4, because I want them to get into their heads that there's 4 types of activities. So second of the 4 types is counseling. We're defining counseling as the counseling activities. Counseling activities help some students successfully address social or personal concerns that are interfering with learning. This time we're emphasizing the word some. Not all students have a personal or social issue that's interfering with learning. If your school and your kids are typical, about 1 in 5 or 20% of your kids have some type of social and personal issue that's getting in the way of their learning. So counseling activities help address those issues. Counseling activities are not educational in focus, so they need to be delivered by a licensed practitioner, a licensed school counselor, school social worker, or school psych. These are people that have a theoretical basis upon which they work. They understand techniques, and they've had, most importantly in my opinion, they've had a supervised practice experience. So they know what they're doing when they get in with their interventions. So I don't know if your advisory council will be aware of this. Probably many of them are if they read the newspaper. But kids are coming to school with lots of different kinds of issues that do interfere with learning. And if we can help kids address these issues through our counseling activities, it just makes them better learners. So just lots of different issues. I want to introduce the idea of a student assistance team. This is something that most schools in the counseling part of school counseling will end up setting up. A student assistance team, the makeup of the team is in the bottom right. The team is made up of a licensed student assistance professional, a counselor, social worker, psych, trained teachers, and trained administrators. A lot of the training for the teachers and administrators is in the limits of confidentiality. And in confidentiality. So the tasks of the team are to receive referrals from teachers, parents, students, everybody, to review cases, to recommend interventions, and then the follow-up to see how's the intervention going, and do we need to drop the intervention because there's no longer a concern, or adjust it, or add a different intervention, or whatever. So, and then the other part with the counseling is we want to help people understand that while there are some interventions like individual group and crisis counseling and consultation referrals that should be limited to a licensed provider, there are other interventions that other people can do to help with social personal issues. For example, if friendly listening is often extremely helpful in a case that's less involved. And a peer helpers program, or teacher advisors, or community mentors, the friendly listening that they do can be a counseling intervention. Information sharing, same thing. And then sometimes, and those folks, those level 2 folks, they do have training. There's training in listening skills, there's training in limits of confidentiality, and who to report to if they need to break confidentiality. But the level 1 are things that it doesn't really take any training to do. Sometimes just changing a seat assignment can help address a personal social issue, and that's something that a parent or a teacher, these types of activities that folks with no training can do to help in a social personal situation. So, okay. Then the third of the 4 types of activities are advocacy activities. Advocacy activities help create a learning environment that supports rigorous learning for all groups of students, for example, low-income students, and all individual students. And there's lots of folks that can advocate for students. It doesn't have to be a school counselor, but we do think that it is part of the job of the school counselor. So in advocating, the goal is to create an environment where all students can master a rigorous curriculum. So it might be like in my school, there was a course that required a very expensive piece of equipment. And so none of my low-income students could register or enroll in that course because they couldn't afford the equipment. And so the counselors went to bat to advocate for those students, and you know, we ended up getting the prerequisite changed so that all students could enroll in that course. So that was an advocacy for a group of students, for our low-income students. And then also school counselors advocate for individual students that maybe is having a run-in with a teacher, or maybe an annual case conference in special ed that they're advocating for the student. So counselors advocate for groups of students and also for individual students. And then the fourth kind of activity are management activities. Management activities are the behind-the-scenes tasks that are necessary for the school counseling program to run smoothly and efficiently. They're provided by school counselors, and they are a good use of counselors' time. They make the program be more effective. Here are types of management activities: program development, doing needs assessments, activity development, materials development, professional development, going to conferences, workshops, what we're doing right now, networking, and then evaluation. These are all management tasks that make the school counseling program run more effectively. So those are the four types of tasks: guidance, counseling, advocacy, and management. But there is this fifth type of task that is not part of the school counseling program that we call non-program tasks. And we're defining non-program as anything that a counselor does that does not help students master guidance standards and does not help students address a personal or social problem that's interfering with learning. Any other activity that's not doing one of those two things is considered a non-program task. It's not part of the school counseling program. So here are some common activities that are assigned to school counselors that have nothing to do with guidance or counseling. They're non-program tasks. Now, I am always very careful when I put up this slide because I know I'm making the principal a little nervous. The principal knows that these things have to get done, and the principal knows that he or she is also overworked and doesn't have time to do these things. So I always say, I'm really careful to say, you know, these are really good tasks. Somebody has to do them. And if it makes most sense for the school counselors to do them, then we'll do them, of course. But we want to take a look at what are counselors not doing when they're spending their time doing these things that they could be doing. So we just want to explore that. How are the counselors using their time, and is there a better way to assign or manage these non-program tasks so that counselors can spend more time with kids and parents? But they are good tasks, and somebody has to do them. We just want to explore the best way for doing that. So, okay. Then finally, we're talking about activity balance, and we're letting the Advisory Council know that down the road, after we define student needs, we're going to be coming back to all these 4 and 5 with non-program types of tasks, and we're going to be defining what percentage of time would we like our school counselors to spend in each one of these types of tasks. If you're a counselor that's been spending a lot of time in non-program, your Advisory Council is going to be saying, we do not want our person to spend time in non-program tasks. They'll, once you get to all the student needs, they're going to want you in guidance and counseling. So we'll put down the targets, and then later in the year, we'll come back and we'll look at the actual data. You can let them know, you know, we're doing time task logs, and we'll come back with our actual data, and we'll see how close we are to our targets, and then figure out what we need to do to adjust. Okay. Then last thing before break is looking at accountability, and just explaining to your Advisory Council that, you know, as school counselors, we want to be accountable. We want to know, are we doing a good job? We want data to tell us that story. So for our accountability focus, we're going to be looking at the percentage of students who make targeted choices, and we'll collect baseline data, and then we'll collect and then after we implement activities, we'll collect follow-up data to see, did our activities make a difference? Did our more kids making our targeted choices after our activity implementation. So to gather our data, we're going to gather data in two ways. One is that we gave a survey last spring, and the survey had results data questions on it. So we just asked the kids, have you made these choices? Did you take a career interest inventory? Yes, don't know, no. Have you written a high school course plan? Yes, don't know, no. Have you submitted a FAFSA? And we're just letting the kids tell us which choices have you made and which choices have you not made. And then I always point out here, I always say, because if somebody's thinking it, I'll say, could the kids lie on this survey? Absolutely they could. But the majority of kids, and we've surveyed all of our students, the majority of students are going to answer the survey honestly, and we'll be able to see trends as we move from one item to the next that will give us a heads up on what choices kids are making and what choices they are not making. Then another way that we'll collect data is we're actually going to find things that we can count in addition to the survey. So for example, on number 2 on the high school course plan, we can ask the kids, did you fill out a high school course plan? But I can also go into the file drawer on my desk and count up how many course plans do I have on file and calculate the percentage that way. So we're going to do survey data, and then for some items we'll also be counting items. And then that takes us to break. So 10-minute break, and then right back at it, and I'm going to jump right in because we're running a little behind. So you're talking next about the organizational structure, and you're first talking about the steering team. I tell them who's on the steering team and that it's your job to facilitate these 6 discussions with the Advisory Council. And then you're going to use the Advisory Council's input to develop the different components of the school counseling program. And then I always like to point out that the steering team are the worker bees. In between meetings, they have stuff to do. They're going to take all of the discussion and turn it into documents, turn it into products. Then the Advisory Council that they are part of, their job is to attend the 6 meetings, to provide input on the program design, and then to provide feedback once you start implementing activities, and to serve as ambassadors for the school counseling program as feel comfortable in doing that. And then I always point out that the Advisory Council are not worker bees. Once they go home from the meeting, they're done. But at the meetings, they are the thinker bees, that they, we need them to come and think, that they represent all these different perspectives, and they're going to help us think through what do kids need, what choices do kids need to make, and then what's the best way to get kids to make those choices. So, and then finally, we have the implementers, and this we kind of already went over, but that the implementers of the program are not just school counselors, but all different kinds of educators, parents, and community organizations, that we all have a role in guiding our community's young people and teaching our community's young people. Okay, and then the process. So you'd be telling your Advisory Council, here's the design process, and we're going to start with our achievement goals, but we're really focusing on the student choices and then designing the guidance and counseling activities. And so here's the process we're going to use this year. We've already started out by, getting ready. We put the steering team in place, collected data, and then just quickly going through each of the steps and kind of explaining what each step is and what they'll be doing when they come back month after month for the six meetings. Okay, and then finally the school counseling portfolio. I don't think you need to go through all of the online system with your Advisory Council. They just need to know that you have an electronic portfolio that as they think and give you feedback, you'll be developing products and putting it into this portfolio. And that at the end of all of this, you'll have a document, a series of documents, collection of documents that you can turn into ASCA for the ASCA RAMP Award and the Indiana for the Gold Star Award. One of the things I also like to emphasize here is that we're not doing this for the awards. This isn't about adults getting awards. This is about kids having the best program that we can possibly provide for them. The awards is just kind of a side benefit, but it's really about getting the right program, the right activities in place to help kids make good choices so they succeed at school and then can progress on through the next educational level. Okay, then on the norms, we're going to start out with a brainstorm. And a brainstorm, of course, is just lots of ideas being tossed out, no wrong ideas, and no discussion, just one activity, one idea after another. Brainstorms help create a lot of creativity. It's just really fast, and things get just tossed out one after another. So we created a slide that as people are sharing their ideas for group norms with you, you can type them into the slide, or I always prefer to use a flip chart paper. You could also just jot everything down on flip chart. That's up to you. Then after the end, after everybody has all their group norms in there, be it that we're not going to interrupt each other, we're not going to take things personally, we'll show up on time, whatever, then we want to do a consensus check. And that's basically just asking people, look at all the norms that are on the chart. Can you live with these? You don't have to love them, but can you live with them, and can you support them publicly? If there's something out there that they can't live with, you have to take it off the list until you have consensus. If you keep something on the list that even one person says it needs to come off, then you've taught that person and everybody else that you don't really believe in consensus. So if somebody doesn't agree, take it off. You can talk with them later about why it should be in there and argue and try to convince them to get it back on. But if they disagree, it comes off. There will be enough things that you can agree to that I don't think it will be a big deal. And to be honest, I don't think we've ever had a school that has ever had an issue reaching consensus on group norms. Okay, then we're into our first real task of the process, and that is to brainstorm what are the benefits of school counseling for those 5 groups. So again, we've made a slide for you so that you can just type in the benefits as people say them, or you can do this on flip chart paper. But here's benefits for students and teachers and administrators, parents, and then the economic community. And then, you're just ending up by thanking people for coming and telling them that the input that they gave you today on the benefits will be used as you create your benefit statement, and then you'll put that in the portfolio as part of your school counseling program. Okay, so that's that. And again, I'm watching the clock. Let's see if we have any questions while I'm pulling up the online system. Chris, any questions pop up? Chris, I may have muted you. Let me see if I can.
I apologize, Sue. I had muted myself. No, there are no questions.
Okay, that sounds great. Okay, so let's just real quickly look at the online system. Remember, in the online system, these blue, purple, whatever color that is, tabs are the ones that you use almost all the time. So I'm going to come over first. Let's look at the manual. And when I click into the manual, you always want to make sure that the first year is highlighted, and I'm just going to scroll down to the to meeting 1. And you'll see here are the handouts for meeting 1. So the agenda, the roster that has the last column for people to put in perspectives, the intro presentation, the process diagram, and the meeting dates. And then the tools, I'm actually real quickly going to go back to the PowerPoint because I downloaded some of those and made screenshots of them. Okay. A couple of the tools I really want to emphasize. Whoops, I went out of order. Okay, that. Okay, so on the tools, in all of your meetings with your advisory council, there's going to be the first tool that you have is going to be Prep for Meeting 1. It's just a to-do list to help you kind of get organized and make sure you've got all your ducks in line for the meeting. Then the big document, the one you really need to look at, is the facilitator notes. We've given you lots of tips in the facilitator notes. We've said things like, here's something that could go wrong, and here's how to avoid it. Here's something that's hard to explain. Here's what you might try. Here's where people might feel resistant, and here's how you can avoid that resistance. We've been doing this for 20 years now. We've heard from so many schools, and that we kind of know where you could get askew. So make sure you read the facilitator notes. And then the other document that every meeting has is tasks following the meeting. So I just want to show you real quickly what those documents look like. Here's the first document, how to prep for the meeting. So it just kind of gives you like a to-do list. Brainstorm advisory council members, call the advisory council members, set the dates for the advisory council meetings for the rest of the year for all 6 meetings. Determine where you're going to meet. Send the introductory letter to the advisory council. So it's just kind of, step by step what to do to get ready for this meeting. Then here's the facilitator notes. And I think these 4 quadrants are really helpful to just kind of get you centered on and focused on the meeting. The first top left quadrant is we always will give you the objectives. What are we trying to accomplish through this meeting? Then there's, again, the meeting prep, a list of handouts, and then the products. And I think that products is also helpful to know ahead of time this is what we need to come out of the meeting with. So in this case, we need to come out of this meeting with a poster that lists the group norms and a second poster that lists the benefits brainstorm. So a poster or a PowerPoint slide. So then if you scroll down to the bottom part of this sheet, you're going to see each different section of the agenda, and then there's a whole bunch of discussion after that. So in the intro, we've given you lots of ideas about conducting the introductions, lots of things to think about as you're going through the foundational beliefs and the terminology. So I would really make sure that you read the facilitator notes, because I think there's a lot of good information that we've learned from previous schools that will help you. And then after the meeting, this is what the follow-up document looks like. So in this case, after meeting 1, you're going to submit the benefit statement online. You're going to submit the advisory council minutes online, and then you're going to print and send the advisory council minutes to the members. Okay, and then sometimes we put a prep in for the next meeting. In this case, we just wanted to give you a heads up that meeting 2 that you'll have in October requires a film. And there's 2 ways you can get the film. You can borrow it from us. If so, you need to give us 2 weeks notice that you want to borrow it from us and then return it to us. The film is out of print, so you can't buy one. You've got to borrow it. Or you can download it in 2 parts from YouTube. It's a 60-minute segment that we'll use as part of our visioning activity. So, let me see. Now, let me go back. So, and the work that you're turning in, on the benefit statement is pretty general. We're just looking, this is the rubric items. We're just looking that you have listed in your benefit statement the benefits for students, teachers, administrators, parents, and the workforce. On the Advisory Council agenda, we just want to give you a heads up that at the end of the year, you're going to be asked to submit as one document all 6 of your agendas. So make sure you're saving the agendas so that you can scan them into one document and then upload it to us at the end of the year. Now, the minutes can make a huge difference with the engagement of your advisory council. First of all, what you want to do is list who's present, because then if I skip this meeting, it's in writing that I skipped the meeting. A little bit of pressure there. So we've got the name of those who are present, and then there's a summary of the activities and discussions. So if somebody has to legitimately be gone from the meeting, they can read the minutes and kind of figure out what happened. But the big thing is that 4th thing. We'd really strongly suggest to you that your minutes contain references to specific people who contributed ideas. For example, you would say, in your minutes, you would say, Sally Smith added that, and then you'd say what Sally said. And then, a few lines later, and Jack Doe, felt that, and then you summarize what Jack thought. So we have found that is really helpful in helping folks understand that they're there because you want to listen to them, and what they said was so important that you not only heard it, but you wrote it down in the minutes. And I can almost guarantee you that you'll get them back to the next meeting. Most people, when they come to school, most adults in the community, parents, when they come to school, they're used to being talked at. They'll go to a meeting and the principal will stand up and talk at them. They're not used to being to going to meetings and being asked for them to talk and for us to listen. So we really need to kind of play that up a lot, and putting people's names in the minutes is something that really shows that we're there to listen and they're there to talk. Okay, so now, very quickly, let's go on the online system. Okay, so on the manual page, here's the handouts. I scroll down to meeting 1. Here's the handouts, and here's all the tools. If you don't like the way we've worded something, you can change anything you don't like. Change it to meet what will work best in your school. That goes for the PowerPoint as well for the Word docs. Then the next thing I'm going to do is look at the process page. I want to make sure that you know how to get stuff in there. First of all, I'm going to scroll down to September, and here are the steps for September. So you're going to conduct Advisory Council meeting 1. Here's the link that goes straight to the manual for the meeting. Then I'm going to enter the benefit statement. So this download is a sample benefit statement. I'm going to enter my benefits, so I'm going to click on the enter icon, and I've just got text boxes. I'm going to write benefits, and I'm just going to write school counseling, help students, by, and then all the different reasons. One thing, the online system, the web-based online system, does not recognize a lot of characters. If you want to make a list, you can do that by just using dashes, or some people like to make lists by using small letter O's. So that works the same way. So just remember that the system does not like characters. Okay, and then our programmer tries to put save over the place to remind you to save, but don't forget to save or you'll lose everything, which is not fun. Okay, so I'll go back to the process page, benefit statements. After I have all the benefits in, I can print the report out here. And next I want to look at entering in my meeting minutes. So I'm going to click on enter. And here is a page that brings up all of the meetings. I'm on year 1, I am. I'm going to enter minutes for meeting 1 introduction. Click the enter edit icon. And I'm just writing here the date, who's writing the minutes, and then I'm just going to type the minutes in there. Sometimes schools tell me they like to create the minutes in a Word doc and then just cut and paste them into here. That would work just fine. Don't forget to save. Okay, so and then the last thing in the process page is to check the rubric items, make sure that you've met all the requirements for those items that you're submitting this time. So, okay, so that's the process page. There's one other thing I want to show you. When your advisory council folks before, so I can get to that 2 ways. I'm just going to go through and build your advisory council, enter your advisory council. That was something we did last month. I'm going to enter, and when I put in an advisory council member, add a new person, we left the perspective blank. Once during the introductions, once the advisory council member has said I can represent 3rd grade parents, then we want to go back to this page and write down 3rd grade parents. Whatever they said, we're going to write that down, that they could represent that group. So if you'll go back and fill that in, that would be great. So I think that's it. So let me go back to my slides, see if I forgot anything. And if you've got questions, why don't you get those hands up? I think that kind of did it. Yep, that's it. So, any questions coming up, Chris? Any hands up?
No, I see no questions. Sue?
Okay, that sounds good. So, I think if this is normal for you, everybody always tells me they're nervous as heck when they go in for this meeting with their advisory council, especially because I think a lot of times in schools we don't interact with community people, so that's kind of new. So if you're nervous, that's normal. But I can almost promise you that when you get that group of people in there and everybody is trying to help you and everybody's on the same page as you, trying to help kids make good decisions, it is so uplifting. I think you'll come out of it just feeling really renewed. So I can't wait to talk to you guys next month and to see how these advisory council meetings went. So if you need us in between, please feel free to give us a call. And I'm sorry we went over a little bit. I always try to get these meetings closed in 1 hour, and we've been a little long today, so I apologize for that. So, okay, thanks everybody very much, and we'll talk with everyone next month.